there and buttoned her blouse. Then she pushed herself up from the tarred wood with its hardened drippings of black goo and walked across it and out into the dusty gravel again. The moon was coming out. She was afraid of the dogs that barked from the yards and sometimes came to the ends of the driveways and bared their teeth, but none came after her. She walked past a building set well back from the road and saw a dark cross set into the wood high up near the gable. She stopped. There was a light somewhere inside, a yellow beam that shone through stained-glass windows. She wondered if there might be a water tap in the yard or on the side of the house. She turned down a neat drive covered with pea gravel, brushing the strands of her hair back from her face with her fingers. There was a light on a pole at the back, and she could see a low wire fence and outcroppings of polished stones inside it. A whirling dance of insects hung around the pole. The light hummed with a low, steady drone, and it cast a gauzy veil over everything. Crickets sounded from the dark woods back there. She went cautiously, even though there were no cars in the parking lot. Her steps were loud to her in the gravel. The west wall lay in shadow, and there was a brick border for flowers near the entrance. She walked closer and saw a coil of garden hose in the damp grass and saw where it ended, a faucet protruding from a corner of the foundation. She went over to it and turned it on. The water was cool and sweet. She was standing there drinking from the end of the hose when she heard it growling and turned her head to see a speckled knot of hair and bones with its head hung low between its shoulder blades, standing 30 feet away. It moved closer, and an odd clanking moved with it. She knew better than to run, so she let the hose drop from her hand and faced it. The dog seemed propped on its legs, and a bit of drool swung from its jaw. The canines were bared in a bloody muzzle, and its eyes were sick. Another ragged growl escaped it, and it seemed hard-pressed to draw each breath. The foot that was caught in the rusty trap was nearly severed, and the dog tried to hold it aloft as it came toward her, half whining, maybe for help. She backed toward the front porch and stepped onto it. There was a decorative iron column on each corner, leaves and vines hammered and painted, cool beneath her hands. The dog came closer. She turned to the double doors, the dark wood and the heavy brass knob. The door on the left opened when she twisted the knob, and she stepped quickly inside, slammed it, and stood with her back against it. The dog whined once, and then there was nothing but the slight rattle of metal against gravel as the chain and trap were dragged away. She listened for a while, but she couldn't hear anything else. She stepped away from the door and put the strap of her purse up over her shoulder. She went forward, reluctantly, uneasy in a stranger's home. A room like none she'd ever been in. A carpeted hallway that only whispered beneath her tennis shoes, and long, polished benches of wood shining faintly in the half-gloom. She walked slowly, touching the dark brown pine. The ceiling pointed upward with long beams, and chubby babies, dressed in flowing swatches of cloth, danced on air amid fields of flowers in a long painting across the back of the room, or gathered at the feet of Jesus in a robe with a beard and long hair, seated on a stone. The tips of her fingers touched small brass plaques at the ends of the rows. The walls were lined with windows like the ones in front, beaded chips of glass in blue and red and gold, and at the front there sat a table holding bowls of polished metal, a white-lace tablecloth. There were other paintings of Jesus and people. Children were always gathered about him. In all the paintings, he wore a look of sorrow. There was no sound in that vast room at all. She wondered if the dog had gone away. She hoped it had. She thought it might be best to stay in here for a while, give it time to go somewhere else. The long benches were covered with soft material that felt good under her hand. A small stage was beyond the table, and on it stood a dark wooden platform. She opened a little side gate with a click, and then went up the 2 steps to stand in front of the rows and rows of benches facing her. A Bible lay open before her, bound in leather, the pages so thin. She riffled through them, let them slide from her fingers. Somebody had to stand up here and talk to all these people. "It's a church for rich folks," she said. The sound of her voice reverberated in the room, echoed quietly off the walls. She stepped away from the book and went back down the steps, out through the gate, around the rail. There was a door set into the rear wall, and she opened it and found herself in a kitchen. Only a dim light burned over a stove. Rows of long tables and metal folding chairs, shoulder to shoulder. There was a wall switch beside the door, and she flipped it up. The lights in the ceiling flickered for a moment and then came on strong, a bright glare that showed dishes racked beside a sink and cans of coffee left on a counter and cabinets that lined the back side of the room. A white refrigerator. She set her purse on the counter and opened the door to see milk in cartons, covered dishes with casseroles and fried chicken, sliced ham. The lights hummed in the ceiling. She found a plate and a fork in one of the cabinets and a loaf of bread in a corner of the counter and heaped the plate with food and poured a glass of milk. She sat down at one of the long tables and began to eat. The chicken was dry, but she didn't care. Crumbs fell to the table on each side of the plate. She wished she'd known of this place on those nights back in the woods when there was nothing to rock against her empty belly except for her knees. Those times they'd waited for the old man to come in with something to eat, and waited all night many nights, and he never did. After a while she got up and poured herself another glass of milk and rummaged through the cabinets again. There were some fresh doughnuts in a cardboard box. She got 3 of them and sat back down and ate them one by one, and licked the icing from her fingers when she was done. In her purse, she found the mangled pack of cigarettes that her brother Gary had given her, and she got one out, holding it between her fingers while she searched for the matches that she found finally beneath tubes of cheap lipstick and plastic combs and hair bands, things she'd saved for years. She lit the cigarette and waved the match out and dropped it into her purse and then pulled out another chair to prop her feet on and stretched out, blowing smoke lazily at the ceiling, thumping the ashes into the chicken bones on her plate. There was only one more thing she could have asked for. The instant coffee was in a drawer, and she heated water in a pan, found sugar and stirred it into the swirling coffee, and sat down again with the steaming cup in front of her. She had one more cigarette, but by then she felt she'd already been there too long. She put the dishes she'd taken food from back into the refrigerator and scraped the scraps into a trash can with a lid. She ran hot water into the sink and added detergent that was there, and washed the plate and the glass and the cup and the spoon and the fork, put them back where they had been, wiped the crumbs from the table with a paper towel. She put the chairs back in their places and put the pan away. When she was done, she got her purse and checked one last time to see that everything was as it had been. Then she turned the light off and went out. In the middle of the big room, she stopped again. Jesus seemed to gaze down upon her with his painted eyes. She looked at the table and the empty bowls. Even though she felt just from the expression on his face that he wouldn't mind her taking the food and eating it, she turned and went back up the quiet aisle to the table and reached inside her blouse for the folded money tucked into the bra. She unfolded the money, put one bill in a bowl, the other one back into the bra. Nothing changed inside the room. It crossed her mind to find a corner to sleep in, but she was still too close to the place she had left. When she cracked the heavy door open and peeked out, the dog had gone. She pulled the door shut behind her and went on up the drive toward the blacktop. And then she remembered that the water was still running at the side of the building, and went back down there and turned it off. The road climbed over hills where distant fields lay spread below her, and the yard lights of houses were spots of blue shining, and the red moving tails of cars crept along a far-off highway with only a hint of noise. The traffic was sparse, and the 2 cars that passed her neither slowed nor stopped. An old country road where the pavement was lumpy with patches of hot mix and crumbled